Hello interwebs, welcome to Adamant IT. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the Insta360 Link 2 and Link 2C web cameras. Now, I won't bury the lead. People who've been watching for a while or know just what equipment I use will already know that I already have a pair of Link 1 cameras that I'm recording this video on right now. So, there's a lot of bias from me coming into this, and as such, I'm not going to call this a review because, yeah, I know I'm going to like this camera. Instead, what I want to do is compare and contrast it with the Link 1 and look how this camera has evolved. And I think that its evolution is interesting for two reasons. Number one, they've removed some functionality from the Link 1, which makes for a very interesting talk about which one you should buy. But also, they've managed to really drive down the cost of this camera. And I want to double check if that has come at any compromise other than some of the pan, tilt and roll functionality. But also, if that now means that this is just the go-to web camera for me. Because while I love the Link 1 to bits, but it has always been an expensive boy. And whenever someone has said, oh, what webcam do you use? Your cameras look great for webcams. I'm like, I use the Link. However, it ain't cheap. So like, if you're just starting out on streaming, then it's probably kind of overkill. And also, that pan, tilt, roll and zoom for someone who just needs a face cam, kind of not necessary. And you're paying for a lot of functionality that you probably don't need. So with all of that said, let's roll the intro and then we're going to unbox these and I'm going to start going through the differences in the specification on them. And we'll talk about the prices and the specs and which one you should buy for which scenario. And then I also want to have a look at the software because the software has also evolved. And I can show you some of the functionality that we've gained with the new version of the software for these as well. So, see you guys after the cut. So firstly, a reintroduction is necessary. What are these web cameras? So the Insta360 Link is a 4K 30fps or 1080p 60fps webcam. The original Link 1 was differentiated because it was on a 3-axis gimbal, meaning that it can pan, tilt, roll and zoom. And that makes it a very, very versatile webcam. It's basically a drone camera that you can plug into your computer and use as a webcam. The other thing that differentiated it is that, like with a lot of these high-end drone cameras, it is really high quality, as you can see. However, the drawback of this is that it was a pretty expensive webcam, clocking in at around about $300-ish, peaking at $350 if my memory serves me. Now, the Link 2 is an evolution of this, where they've dropped one of the axes of movement, with it now just having pan and tilt, or on the 2C, it becomes just a fixed webcam, but you get the same level of resolution and quality that you get from the Link. And in exchange for that, the price of these is significantly less. So let's take a quick look on the inside here, just so you can see what you get in the boxes. So on this one, as you can see, we've got, well, what it looked like on the box. And in this one, we get that. So both of these come with the same stand. So if I take the stand out, it's the same on both. We get a metal stand that can hook over the top of your monitor. And it's got a screw mount on the bottom. This is also rubberized, so it can sit on a desk. This part here is also rubberized, so it won't slip down the back of the monitor. It will actually grip, hooks over the top, and then the webcam itself can magnetically latch onto it, like so. And then it can also tilt, like so. So you've got a huge amount of movement to get this thing at just the right angle. This tilt is really handy because it means that if you're mounting this on top of a monitor, it can actually tilt and look down at your desk as well. And that's for one of its party tricks where you can use it as a desk cam that sits on top of your monitor without needing like some kind of arm mount like what I'm using for this top-down camera that I have here. Or you can mount them on a thing. So yeah, very cool. Then the 2C is the same body, but it doesn't have, as you can see, there's no gimbal on it at all. And then the other differentiating factor is the 2C has this mechanical shutter latch on the side here as well, which is always nice to see. The shutter function on this one is effectively automatic. When they switch off, it basically just ducks like that. It just looks directly down and switches off. So the on this one you get mechanical shutter. On this one, when it switches off, it just looks away, basically. It does not perceive. Both of them have got Type-C ports on them as well. However, although they are Type-C connections, these cameras only use USB 2. And that's just because Insta360 are using just some kind of magic image compression that personally I cannot see with the naked eye. It's a fantastic picture quality despite not being USB 3. So you get the same mount in both of them, and you also get the same USB 2 Type-C cable in here. So we've got a 1 meter cable with Type-C at both ends, and it comes with a Type-C to Type-A adapter. So I really like that it's a Type-C cable, and it comes with the adapter to Type-A, so you can use it on whatever setup you have. I would like the cable to be a bit longer, because if you want to put one of these up on your monitor and you need that to reach down to your PC on the floor, this ain't going to reach. So, you know, like if you're going to ship a really nice cable, make it a 2 meter cable. I would also appreciate it if it was just a USB 3 cable, just so this was good for other stuff, because USB 2 cables aren't really of any use to anyone. But then on the flip side, there's a strong argument to be made that this cable is for the camera, so it doesn't actually matter. So I would I love the fact that they ship a Type-C to Type-C with an adapter. But if you really want to push the envelope, Insta360, it would be awesome if you could make it like 2 meter USB 3 or something like that, just so it actually is a really nice cable. But all that being said, let's take a look at the rest of the camera. So I'm not a photography expert, so I don't know a whole lot about apertures and f-stops and stuff like that. They claim to have a f-stop of 1.8, and the Link 2 also proudly states that it has a 1/2 inch image sensor in it as well. Now, that 1/2 inch image sensor can be a bit of a misnomer. I'm not sure if the Link 1 has a 1/2 inch sensor in it or not. I couldn't find out on the website. But the other thing that makes me wary whenever someone's just like, 1/2 inch sensor, I have looked at other webcams that have a 1/2 inch sensor in, and they are garbage. I did look at another webcam that said it had a 1/2 inch Sony sensor, and it was garbage. The video never saw the light of day. And so just because a camera says it's got a fancy 1/2 inch sensor in it, that doesn't necessarily make it good. The magic is in the image processing. Thankfully, I already know that the Insta360 Link cameras have got magic image processing. So I'm not gonna linger on the technical specs and the numbers, because really the picture is what matters as far as I'm concerned. So with that being said, I'm going to switch scenes here. I'm going to take both of these home to my home office, and because then I've got a nicer background there, and I can show it with some more difficult lighting setups and that kind of thing. So let's move to the home. What you're seeing right now is a Logitech Brio, and this is the baseline that I'm going to use in this review. You might wonder why I'm bothering with it when I have a Link 1 already, but the Brio is still a titan amongst webcams. I shot mainline Adamant IT videos on it for years as both the bench cam and my face cam. I had 2 of them. And it consistently outperforms most cheap cameras and a lot of other cameras that sell themselves as studio quality streamer cameras. It costs about £130, and given the fact that this camera was released a long time ago, that's not great, but given its position in the market, it's quite reasonable. Now, I already know from my experience with the Link 1 that the Link 2 is going to demolish the Logitech Brio. But given that I like the Brio a lot, I think it's always worth showing it off as a baseline for what a typical good webcam looks like. For reference, this is my desk at home where I edit and stream on Twitch. I have bisexual lighting on the back wall and 2 softboxes on my face. The softboxes make it easy for most cameras to see me, but the background can be a little bit tricky because of the strong colors throwing everything off. So I think this is a pretty good test. It's also fairly reasonable for how a lot of other people are going to use their cameras, because back in the shop, I've got very strong ceiling lighting, I've got multiple studio lights pointing at the desk. It's just not a realistic scenario for most people. Whereas this home streamer setup with a little bit of studio lighting, but not really a room that's set up for it, I think is a much fairer test. Now, this is the Link 2. You can see right away that the definition is way higher. You can see the lines on my forehead and way more detail in my hair and my beard. The color's also way more on point as well. Logitech cameras tend to blow out reds a lot, and you have to set the color to a cooler temperature to compensate for this. But on the Link 2, the true purple of the background lighting is coming through, and the entire scene is warmer, yet my lips are actually paler and more true to real life. Both of the cameras are running at 1080p 60 FPS, so there's no resolution advantages here. It's all in the camera and the processing. You can see why resolution is basically meaningless when talking about webcams now. You can put two 1080p web cameras side by side and have a completely different experience. So this is when working with some studio lighting on me. Let's see what happens if we go into low light situations now, because that is another good test. Because while any competent streamer or content creator is going to have some face lighting on them, if you're using this for, just, I don't know, Zoom or Discord, that kind of thing, you probably don't want studio lights on if you're just in a Discord call with friends, yet you want to look half decent. So let's try it with the studio lights off. First, I'll switch back to the Logitech. Welcome back, Brio. I've just realized I've been looking at the wrong camera when I actually was trying to talk to the camera, so I do this for a living. Anyway, so now let me turn off my lights. Whoop. So with the softboxes switched off, the Logitech has kind of descended into terribleness. Let me just pull up Logitech settings, wherever the heck that has gone. There it is, I did open it. And let me just see if I can do anything to fix this. We're already on auto exposure. Let me just turn off auto exposure and just pump the exposure. Yeah, if I pump the exposure to try and brighten the image up, we descend into a smeary mess. So yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, yeah, that's not going to cut it. So as you can see, with just the moody streamer lighting, we basically get nothing here. Even if I had a stronger ceiling light on, that's going to light up the back of my head, but it's going to cast a shadow across the front of my face, so it's not going to fix this. Fine, okay, let's turn those back on. And as soon as I give myself some front lighting, as you can see, the camera completely recovers. It's not a bad camera, this, but that was a difficult situation. Let's see how the Link handles it. Right, now we're back onto the Link 2, and I'm a little bit overexposed at the moment because I've noticed that the Insta360 cams, they tend to take a little bit longer to auto exposure. They try not to change too quickly. I might be able to force it just by holding up a hand to a camera. It'll probably tone itself down a little bit after a while, but let's turn off the lights again. So if I turn those off, again, I descend into darkness. It's about the same, actually. Right, let's see. I'm on manual exposure. Let's switch to auto exposure and see how it does. Bam. And that is auto exposure, which has done a pretty good job, to be honest. It's brightened me up, and the picture is still pretty smooth. We're getting some flicker. The flicker you're seeing is my monitors, which are high refresh monitors, illuminating my face. So that flicker is going to be extremely difficult to deal with without doing some tweaking with the camera. But at any rate, though, as you can see, even in a very low lighting situation, the Link 2 is actually doing a pretty stellar job at digging a decent picture out of this. And let's bring back the lighting again. So we get a moment of massive overexposure, and then it compensates again. And there we go, it's calmed down to a pretty decent level where I'm illuminated and in the foreground, and the background has just pulled back now. So yeah, that's a decent result. So that's a very clear win for the Link there. But like I said, that's a surprise to no one. I already knew this camera was going to obliterate the Brio because its predecessor did. So now I've given you a baseline on what to expect from these cameras as a whole. Now I'm going to connect up my Link 1 and let's see if the Link 2 is actually better than the previous one or whether this is just a feature set change. Putting the two cameras side by side here, we've got the Link 1 on the left and the Link 2 on the right. And to be honest, there's almost nothing in it as far as I'm concerned. The Link 1 looks slightly warmer. I actually prefer the picture on the Link 1 a little bit more, but I bet if I dialed the saturation on the Link 2 up to, say, 55% instead of 50, yeah, I can almost immediately make the difference practically imperceptible. So there is functionally nothing in it as far as I'm concerned here. So certainly with the studio lighting on, basically no difference. Let's switch off the lights and see if either of them are handling low light better than the other. So if we turn off the lights, we can see them adjust slightly. And looks like that saturation boost might be hurting the Link 2 now. I'll just pull that back to 50 again. Yeah. Again, I'm tempted to say the Link 1 is fractionally better. Like if I had to pick one or the other here, the Link 1 seems to be holding a better picture to me. But again, as we saw from the previous comparison, the Link 2 is still a stunningly good camera, even in low light conditions. Once again, the light source is behind me. This is a bad case scenario here. It's not the worst case scenario. I could turn off all the lights, but it's not great. So yeah, that's pretty good. Turning on the lights again. They both sort of recover in more or less the same amount of time. So yeah. Again, I think I almost look a little bit paler on the Link 2 on the right. The Link 1 makes me look slightly yellow, but come on. Whatever. There's so little in it that it doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned. I'm calling this a draw, to be honest. You could give me either one of these cameras and I would be very happy. So that means that as far as picture quality goes, there's not really a meaningful upgrade between the Link 1 and the Link 2. And so if you have a Link 1 and you're like, should I upgrade? No. Basically, that almost immediately means the answer is no. But there's a bit more to it than that. Because as well as the change in the actual body of the camera, the Link 2 comes with upgrades to the Insta360 Link controller software. And that includes a lot of stuff for background effects and stuff like that. Let's switch over to the Link 2 and I'll show you. Now, in order to use these effects, you have to run through the Insta360 Link software. And that means you can't get, I think we lose 60 FPS. Can I get back to 60? No, we have to drop to 30 FPS to do this. Although we could do 4K 30. So you can get back some of your losses there by getting the high resolution instead of the high frame rate. In any case, though, if I switch on blur background now, we can do background blurring and we can change the intensity of it. So you can do more bokeh. Oh no, that's just blur. Yeah, okay. So you can just completely wipe out your background if you need to. Then we've also got the bokeh effect. Come on, loading, loading. Is it crashing? Huh. Oh, there we go. There we go. And this seems to do the same thing, just less so. So you can get more of a effect, but you can see right away on my glasses that it's less than perfect. So, okay, but you know, you can also do change your background entirely. So let's see how one of those looks. Here we go. I'm in a modern apartment now. I'm in a modern apartment, or perhaps I'm at a coffee shop now. So this is where I live now. This is the new set that we'll be at. But as you can see, it's not ideal. These effects are only good if you have a crap background that you can't do anything about. So, fine. If we ditch the background effect, we've also got this so-called makeup effects. So I can add myself a little bit of blush to fix my paleness. There we go. Let's just wind up the intensity on it. There we go. A little bit of blush. That's just blowing out my sore lips, so that's cool. What about fresh? This will probably remove some of the bags under my eyes, maybe? Maybe. No. I'm not going to lie, this isn't doing it for me. Rose. It's probably trying to adjust my eyes. Again, I'm not buying it if I'm honest. Okay. And peach is just going to look terrible on me. I'm already too white as it is. Let's just make it all the worse. No, no. Okay, let's turn those off. Now, I was going to make a point about the interesting thing is that even though this is being done in software, if I switch to the Link 1, we no longer have these options here anymore. So these options are locked into the Link 2. Even though it's done in software, they don't allow you to use these effects on the Link 1. Now, I was going to be a little bit bummed out about this. I was going to be like, well, you're not doing it in camera, so why not just give the software upgrade to all Link owners? However, as you can see, the effects are charitably not particularly good. And well, I'll get to this in a moment. The effect is charitably not very good, so this is no great loss as far as I'm concerned. They've locked it behind the upgrade, but also the feature is bad, so who cares? We have to ask ourselves, okay, what are these features for? Well, these are enterprise webcams. These are intended for people who are doing serious business meetings on the internet. They're big business, meeting with the boss, meeting with the board of directors and such like. Or maybe you're a beauty influencer, I don't know. And those kinds of people are probably going to want to do some kind of put on a good show and everything for their conference call. But the thing is like, if you're serious about your conference call or your meeting, you should have some kind of background set up. You know, like basic Twitch streamers like me, we have studio lights, you know, and likewise, you know, I've done a little bit with my background. The colored lighting is there for a reason because I have beige walls and they look crap without colored lighting. So the blue lighting is there to make it look less bad. You're going to do something to make the background look slightly less terrible. And I think anything that you try to do with your background to make it look less terrible is probably going to be an improvement over a really terrible not green screen effect. So yeah, I'm kind of not super fussed about the effects features or the fact that they're blocked behind being on the Link 2. So let's move on from that and let's talk about the gimbal mounts. One more thing that I want to add in during the editing here is while editing this section, I kind of changed my mind. And honestly, I think the Link 2 looked better in the edit. However, this difference is in the color saturation. The Brio actually has color balance problems where the image is cold, and if you try and warm it up, then the reds, like your lips, will just completely blow out. Whereas the Link 1 was a bit oversaturated, and to be honest, if I'd toned down the saturation, it would have looked the same, instead of trying to up the saturation on the Link 2. But so I do prefer the Link 2, but once again, the difference could easily be made up for by just some slight tweaks on the sliders, not by actually changing the camera. Something else that I also forgot to record was a microphone test. Now, I'm not super fussed about webcam microphones because, you know, as with what I was saying about lighting and backgrounds, if you're vaguely serious about creating content, you're not using your webcam's microphone. But if you are just simply using this for Zoom calls and stuff like that, or you've got nothing else on hand and you're stuck with it, well, here's what it sounds like. Now, on the audio waveform, there's a weird delay on it, and I'm not sure if that's coming through in the recording, but at any rate, this gives you an idea of what it sounds like. It's pretty decent, actually. It's not too shabby. It's nowhere near as good as an actual condenser microphone will be, but it's perfectly passable. And compared to a lot of webcam microphones I've heard, which are, I'd rather the person just types in chat, it's not too bad. Now, of course, the big party trick of the Insta360 Link is the auto-tracking feature. So firstly, I'll show you the Link 1's auto tracking, which I should be able to turn on by holding up my hand like this. And there we go, the camera light just flashed, which means it's now tracking me. And now I can go over here and it will follow me about the room. Now, of course, this is really good if you're presenting. If you're in a room, you can move around the room, you can move around your space, and it will just follow you around, which is great when you're solo recording, or if you've got to like point at things. It's also got whiteboard mode where it will lock onto a whiteboard, so you can walk over to your whiteboard and the camera will focus on the whiteboard with you standing to one side and stuff like that. It's also got what's called smart composition, where you can tell it to use its digital zoom to keep my profile in frame or my head in frame, or try and go for a full body shot, for example. So it's a really neat trick, and I don't really use the auto tracking much, but the actual ability for the camera to be on a gimbal like this is incredibly useful to me for framing up shots, because it means instead of having to spend a huge amount of time adjusting the camera to point where I want it to, I have full gimbal controls. If I switch off the auto tracking again, I can now just use the manual controls of the camera to pan around as I see fit, like so. So having demonstrated that, let me now show you how the Link 2's gimbal works. So once again, I'm going to hold up my hand to switch on auto tracking. The light blinks at me to let me know that it's tracking me, and I can start moving around. But you'll notice that something's very wrong with this now. Something has changed about this setup that is not nearly as good. And the cause of that is that the Link 2 is only 2 degrees of freedom instead of 3 degrees of freedom. It has yaw, which is the look left, look right, and it has roll, which is look up and look down, but it doesn't have pitch, which is twist, like that. And what this means is that if the camera is not dead flat on its mount, when we move to one side, we start rolling because the mount is rolled and the camera can't correct for it. By comparison, the Link 1, which does have roll, automatically self-levels itself as it's twisting. So this might come across as possibly a bit of a deal breaker, but the solution is actually very simple. Let me show you. Let me just turn off tracking for a moment. There we go. And I'll just lean in here. And I think about that looks right. Let's try that again. Right, so we're tracking again, and I'll just walk over here once again. So now you'll notice that the problem has basically disappeared because I've made sure that the camera is actually level where it's sitting on top of the monitor. So obviously this is a bit of a dilemma. You know, losing that degree of freedom, initially it seems like a total deal breaker that cripples the main party trick of the camera itself. But it's actually very simple to resolve just by making sure that the camera is flat. And the monitor mount that the camera comes with makes this very simple. It's not difficult to make sure that it's flat on top of your monitor. This could be an issue if your whole monitor is at a Dutch angle, but I think that's another problem at that point. So this isn't a deal breaker, but let me show you how I use these cameras, and you can see why this immediately means that the camera isn't practical for my uses. So to do the bench cam that you guys are normally used to seeing, if I have a fixed camera like the Link 2C or my old Logitech Brios, I've got to sit here every time I start filming, swing the boom arm in and adjust it until it looks about right. And I do this mixture of by eye. My old Brio, I actually had a little spirit level on top, and that looks about right to me. But one of the big problems is that, you know, if I move the camera down, I've got to adjust it, and if I want to look, say, over here a bit more, if I move it this way, now it goes sideways. And so I can't twist the camera at all. So if I actually want to do that, what I have to do is move the thing. And now I've got to walk around the back of the bench, pick up the boom arm and move that along a little bit. Okay, there we go. I think that looks about right. You get the point. And I'll swap back to my standard issue Link 1 here. And you know what? Just for interest's sake, I'm going to deliberately put the boom arm at a weird angle to give it a worst case scenario. And I'll just put that in there. Plug that guy in. Let it self-calibrate. And now using only the Insta360 Link software, I can just correct all of that in software. Bam. And now we're looking down here at the bottom of the keyboard. And let's say I want to look over here instead. So cool, okay. I'll just move the arm over, adjust that slightly. And once again, I'm just in the software. I can just grab the gimbal and just straighten that out by hand without having to touch the camera. And I know that the actual roll of the camera is perfect every time because it's automatically adjusting for that. So I don't have to worry whether the roll is correct. All I have to do is just make sure that the camera is looking where I want it to look. Job done. This advantage also extends to the Link 1 that I use for my face cam. This camera is mounted on a microphone stand, and due to the nature of the way I work and the podcast and stuff like that, these microphone stands with cameras on them regularly get moved about for whatever purposes. So instead of having to spend time making sure that it's perfectly set up on the straight and level every time, all I have to do is just turn the camera on and it will automatically self-level and even find my face. And as you can see, it's dead level, even though the actual mount is completely skewed. So once again, these are the cameras saving me time and effort all the time. And if I do want to use the auto tracking, then I can simply turn that on. And again, it's tracking me around the room without going to a Dutch angle. So losing one of the degrees of freedom on the gimbal mount, or even losing all of them for the fixed mount camera, seems like a bit of a deal breaker from my perspective. But if we go back to a typical use case for these cameras as, well, webcams, and if you think about how I was using it back at home for my Twitch setup, none of this would actually be an issue. I've actually been using the Link 2 as my main face cam for my Twitch streams for quite a while now, and it's easy enough to make sure it's level, and at that point I can use the auto pan. And because you can save fixed positions for it, I can have it find my face, or if I want to do a bit, I can click on a button to go to a preset and it'll zoom in for a close-up on my face for a comedic moment. Or I can have I can switch on the auto track and have it back out and track my body as I walk around the room. And it works just fine for that. And because it's sitting on my monitor all the time and doesn't move, it doesn't matter that I have to make sure that the camera is actually set up straight in the first place. That's fine. My use case in the shop, where the cameras are constantly getting moved about, is a bit more of a special case. And so from this perspective, you can kind of see why Insta360 didn't mind losing one of those degrees of freedom. But you can also see how that would affect the actual strengths of the camera. So it's up to you whether that's a problem or not. But with the lack of any actual change between the cameras, you know, the microphone array sounding very similar, the pictures being borderline identical, and losing one of the degrees of freedom, it begs the question, well, what is this then? The entire camera is even bigger than the old one as well. So have we upgraded at all? Well, in my opinion, not really. This is a side grade. You know, it's a side grade with a loss of some of the functionality, if anything. So what are we getting in return for that? Well, the simple answer to that is the price. The Link 2 on Amazon at the moment sits at £200, and the Link 2C sits at £150. Now, £150, that is £10 more than the current list price of the Brio. And remember that this camera obliterates the Logitech Brio. It wasn't a contest. And that makes the 2C seriously good bang for buck. Like, this is a serious webcam, and it costs about the price of a Brio. And it's a bit more expensive than some of the other streamer cameras, but as I mentioned earlier in the video, I fully believe that this will also beat most of those other cameras in that price range as well. And so the extra £50 to get the pan and tilt, if this is a feature that is useful to you, I think that's excellent bang for buck. Now, to put things in perspective, when it came out, the Link 1 was £320. Now, that was £320 for what, in my opinion, is the best webcam on the market, but £320 is still a tall order for what is still fundamentally a webcam. So seeing that price get slashed down to £200 makes this side grade make a lot more sense. So yeah, the camera isn't actually any better than its predecessor and has actually lost some functionality, being 2 degrees of freedom instead of 3, but they've knocked off a massive chunk of the price and made the overall cost of the camera far more palatable to the average user. If you're a small-time content creator, like I've always used webcams as my main cameras, so if you're just either streaming or trying to make repair videos, a camera like this is the solution to your problem of, I don't want to spend hundreds of pounds on a mirrorless camera and all of the rigging required to actually frame it up. But there's one more catch to this. The Link 1, being out of date, now costs £190. You can see how it used to be £320, but now they've slashed the price down to 190 quid. And that makes this thing an absolute bargain. So, if you want the best of all worlds, honestly buy the Link 1. But also consider the fact that this thing is probably out of production, so while they're still available right now, at some point it's entirely possible that these will just go out of stock and no longer be available. And in which case, you buy a Link 2C or a Link 2, depending on what your requirements are. For now, I don't think Insta360 will mind me recommending the older camera because it's still their camera. And in my opinion, this is still the best webcam I've ever owned. However, if the Link 1 is no longer available, the Link 2, it's more or less just as good, and the price on it is still stunning in my opinion. So I hope this video has kind of made sense. It's difficult to give these cameras a fair shake without doing a lot of rambling, but I hope that my point of view as a weird content creator with a very oddball production routine kind of shows where these cameras make sense. At home for my Twitch stream, I'm a standard content creator online using a webcam as a webcam, and it was brilliant in that instance. And here in my workshop, where I want cameras that have these gimbal mounts for quick and easy setup, it does work, but not quite as good as the old one. But given that the old one is available at more or less the same price, that's also still a viable option. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you're interested in buying these cameras, I'll have links in the description down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.